Good morning. For those of you in attendance here at Byron Schur at the Kell EPA building, those of you joining online, my name is Ryan Michael Atencio. I'm with the California Air Resources Board, and today we're going to talk about the 2019 Community Air Grants Program Draft Guidelines. A couple of announcements before we begin, because there are some folks in attendance here in the building. Restrooms are out the hall, the doors to your left, emergency exits as well. For those of you joining online, you can submit questions to airgrants.ca, airgrants.arb.ca.gov at any time. So those questions will be queued, and we can go over those and respond or take those comments and considerations after the presentation. We'll have time for that. Also, if you would like to call in at the end of the presentation, we have a operator-assisted call-in line. And all of this information is at our website where you were able to download the presentation material. The number for the call-in line is 888-790-3519. And the number to join is 642-8935. So you can email us with questions or commentary. You can call in. And this is for the purposes of this workshop today. We're starting here at 10 o'clock and running to 12 p.m. And in addition to today's webcast and workshop, which will be archived online so you can revisit when you have a chance, you can also email us at the email that I mentioned, airgrants at arb.ca.gov. For any questions on the program. These draft guidelines are under the public comment period right now, currently, so you can email us questions there. And actually, we also have a docket online where you can see everyone else's commentary, and also you can comment on the program. And that docket is open during the public comment period as well. So all of that information is located where you were able to download the materials. But the public comment period closes May 29, 5 p.m. So with that, again, thank you for being here. Thanks to those online. We'll get started with the presentation here in a minute, but I just wanted to take a second to introduce our Assistant Executive Officer for Environmental Justice, Veronica Eady. Veronica's team, we are the ones that are administering this grants program in support of the Office of Community Air Protection and CARB's AB 617 efforts. The grants program is a piece of that overall effort. Veronica's team is supporting and administering that piece, as well as the environmental justice work across the board. So Veronica, if you wanted to say a few words.
Sure, thanks, Ryan. Good morning to everybody in the room, on the phone, and online. I am Veronica Eady, and I'm really pleased that you all are here with us today. I just want to, Ryan's going to go into a presentation, and you'll hear a lot of how the program has gone to date and how we see it going forward. But I wanted to, with these few minutes, just underscore the importance of the grant program to support community-based organizations in California to engage in the implementation of AB 617. And I'll note that Karen Maliano is in the room. Karen is the director of the Office of Community Air Protection, and we work very, very closely with her and her team. In this first year of implementation, as you may know, in our first year communities, of which there are 10, each community has a steering committee, and community engagement. First of all, on those steering committees, it's multi-stakeholder, but there are a number of community-based organizations, EJ groups, and residents from those 10 communities. Their voices are a really important part of the implementation of this law. And so our hope going forward, and it has been our hope, that these grants, among other things, can support the engagement in AB 617, whether it's building capacity, building local awareness of environmental law and environmental exposure and the implementation of this law, or whether it's supporting local organizations to collect their own data or do curriculum programs at local schools. So those are our really high hopes for this grant program going forward, that we can continue to support that implementation through granting these funds, but also overall in California to build awareness and get people more engaged and get their input as we craft solutions to air quality issues on the ground in local communities. So with that, Ryan, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Veronica. So for those in attendance here in the building, there are copies of the draft guidelines out on the tables. So hopefully you picked up a copy. That's what we're going to be talking about today online. Obviously, that material is available as well. So the 2019 Community Air Grants Program. A little bit about the background of the program. Obviously, it's in support of AB 617, Budget Acts of 2017 and 2018 appropriated funding to support this piece of AB 617 and the other pieces as well. The Budget Acts also provided some pretty specific direction on the types of things that this grant program should be covering, things like technical assistance to community-based organizations, logistics for things like meetings to talk about AB 617. So there was some direction there. And then also California Health and Safety Code. So AB 617 created our statutory mandate seen here under Health and Safety Code. So it's pretty clear the state board shall provide grants to community-based organizations for technical assistance and to support community participation in the implementation of AB 617. So that is really what we're meeting. That's our statutory requirement, our obligation to do so. And that was created by AB 617 and then also enabled and appropriated through those budget bills I spoke of. A little bit about year one results. Last year was the inaugural year of this grant program, and in fact, the inaugural year of our efforts here at CARB on AB 617. And so last year in this grant program, we received 65 applications, and we were oversubscribed. There was 5 million allocated, so we were oversubscribed, 18.9. You see, we awarded actually 10 million. We're able to double that award, and there was distribution throughout the state. You kind of see the map there, the graphic actually. So this is the results of year one, the awarding process. After the end of year one, we came back and we listened to folks, listened to stakeholders, listened to people that had applied, some of the grantees that were selected, and we did some recalibrating on the guidelines, and that is what we're here to talk about today. So like I mentioned, the draft guidelines for year two were just released. That's what we're here to talk about. These are draft guidelines. Again, we're asking for additional stakeholder comment. Again, the public comment period is May 14 through next, I believe Wednesday, May 29. And then, we're aiming to Well, we're going to come back and consider those comments and those commentaries, in addition to all of the calibration, recalibration that we, did in between the close of year one and the draft guidelines. And we are aiming to release in June of 2019, so next month. And it would be a 90-day application window, so 3 months. Here's a graphic just on the kind of the timeline showing where we want to end up with awards being announced in fall of 2019. So a little bit about the program design. I mentioned the statutory, the obligation, the health and safety code. That was our mandate. So as a result, we designed this program to meet that. And the way we did that was to look at projects, or design this program to have a purpose so that the program is able to provide community-based organizations in California with logistical and technical assistance to support their efforts in improving local air quality in line with the goals of AB 617. So what does that mean in practice? So we keep saying AB 617, AB 617. When we released the first, the year one guidelines last year, it was pretty early in the program over the overall efforts. And so the overall efforts here at CARB on AB 617 are more mature. Namely, we have a document that we can really lean on and reference, and that's the blueprint that was put out by our Office of Community Air Protection. So in these year two guidelines, what we really are looking for in practice are projects that seek to support and enhance the utilization of this blueprint guidance document. Effective engagement on an AB and participation on these community steering committees or technical advisories or other mechanisms under 617 implementation. And then also things like being able to engage and comment on 617 monitoring plans and community emission reduction programs. So a lot of what we're doing in year two is trying to build the capacity of community-based organizations and lift that part up so that folks can be able to utilize and engage in the blueprint and through the blueprint in 617, because that's a key document, and you'll see it referenced in the guidelines here. A little bit about the project types under this year two, under the year two guidelines. Last year we had 3 project types. This year we have 2, educational and technical. So they seem kind of self-explanatory, but we've included a lot of examples in the guidelines document themselves. Here I'm just kind of summarizing. So educational types would be things like to support community participation, community engagement, education, supporting the blueprint document, conducting popular education on air quality topics, facilitating and cultivating working relationship with government agencies. Technical type projects would be those that are kind of focusing on community science and AB 617. There's a lot of examples in the guidelines, so I would point you to that, but things like tech assessments, community technical training, community-led air protection, community air protection efforts, community air monitoring support, community-led air monitoring support, things of that nature. So, I mean, if you remember, I mentioned, the intent of actually the health and safety code and then the direction in the budget bills were to provide this actual type of technical assistance. And so that's what this project type is meant to cover. So funding amounts. I'm going to start at the bottom of this graphic, actually. Overall, we have $5 million this round for year 2, and that's broken up by type. Educational, again, these are all laid out in the draft guidelines, and these are what we're proposing under that draft. Educational type projects up to $2 million with a $100,000 cap per project. And then the technical category up to $3 million for, in total for all technical projects, and then up to $300,000 per project. So that was a little different than last year, and we'll go over some of the other differences in the guidelines. But I wanted to take a second here, and we wanted to talk about the things that are in the guidelines, the contents themselves, like what you will find in this document. There's a lot of things, pieces of the guidelines that were there before, and there's some new items which we'll talk about. But like any guideline solicitation or grants application, you'll see there's application cover sheet. There's an application, actually. There's a budget template, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, scoring table, so you can actually see what we're proposing and how we're proposing to score. Then the draft grant agreement, and then also this new item, Exhibit D, which we're having folks include preemptively. So if you're awarded, we already have that information on how to get you the funds. And then attachments A and B. And I skipped over the main thing that I wanted to talk about, because we're going to talk about on the next slide, and that's a minimum qualification statement of understanding. So this is really, really, really important for this year. So what we saw last year, what we learned was when we were doing the evaluation process for all the applicants and all the applications, was there was a lot of great and innovative proposals, but there was a lot of questions from applicants, from stakeholders, from people that wanted some more clarity. Actually, like a checklist. Folks wanted a checklist, like what is the best kind of way that we can package this application up and send it over. I mean, there was different pieces, requirements in different parts of the guidelines. So we put it all together here as a checklist, a statement of understanding. These are the things that folks are going to have to meet in order to meet the minimum qualifications, just to even be considered, because this is a competitive program. This is a competitive program, so these are the minimum qualifications. This is a checklist. It's located on, if you have your guidelines in front of you, page 13. Page 13. So there's the cover sheet that needs to be signed. There's the eligible applicants. You have to acknowledge and sign that you understand that these projects need to be located in and benefiting priority populations, census tracts. There's the postmark date, which will be finalized upon the final solicitation guidelines release. Administrative cost limit. We need to see the budget. We need to see that standard payee form. There's documentation that we'll talk about here, attachment A and B. Board resolution. If your community-based organization has one, and if it's applicable, we'll need a board resolution from that board approving the project. You need to be within the limits that we set in terms of those caps that we spoke about earlier, and you need to sign this statement and send it in. So this is what we're proposing in these draft guidelines in order to add some clarity to what folks we're asking about, and in order for us to be able to kind of evaluate these projects as they come in. Sorry? So actually, there is a, regarding the checklist, if you turn to page 24, it's actually kind of a copy of what you would actually turn in and sign. I think page 13 is the table that's in the guidelines themselves. So same information, the only difference is page 24 is the actual document that you would be having to sign and turn in when you turn in your application. So I mentioned technical projects. Last year, we saw a wide variety of innovative proposals for technical type projects, particularly those that proposed community-led air monitoring efforts. And so there was a lot to consider last year. And so what we learned through that process, again, in listening to folks, was that it would be helpful if there were a framework by which these projects could apply for these, submit these proposals to do this type of technical work. And so what we're doing here for this year, which is new, is we're including attachment B, which is a technical work plan for projects that want to propose to do these type of technical projects. And so in the blueprint, and we were talking about it earlier, in the blueprint, you know, we're referencing the blueprint throughout the guidelines, but specifically there is an appendix in the blueprint that discusses community monitoring and some of the minimum recommendations in order to kind of have a monitoring plan that's robust enough to have these meaningful data. And so what we're doing here in our air grants program is pointing to that appendix. It's Appendix E, it's called. So there's 14 elements in Appendix E that make up that appendix. And so when projects when folks want to propose community-led monitoring within the air grants program, we're asking them to submit a technical work plan that includes the first 5 elements of Appendix E from the blueprint. And so that's what attachment B is, and that's new. If your project is then selected upon scoring and evaluation, that project will have to complete the remainder of the 14 elements. So I think that's like nine more, right? And so when we talk about attachment B, that's on page 57 of the guidelines. And so it's things like detailing, the first 5 elements detail community support and participation, stating the specific community-specific purpose for the monitoring, defining the air monitoring objectives, establishing roles and responsibilities. So these are things that would be helpful for the project to think through and to propose. And it would be helpful for us in order to evaluate, right? To evaluate and to be able to score and rank these, again, because this is a competitive process. So what we're doing through this is providing a framework by which applicants can apply, and we can be able to evaluate and review. I just wanted to spend a little more time on that piece because that's new, and we didn't see that last year. What else is new? I mentioned this earlier. Projects must be located in and benefiting priority populations. So we go into that. What does that mean? We go into that a little bit more in the guidelines, namely SB 535 and AB 1550 communities, and also on tribal lands. So it's priority population and or tribal lands. Other requirements for projects that propose to work with their local air district in that basin where the community is located. We're asking these projects to submit a letter of commitment from the district in that basin in order that we can evaluate the extent of the commitment from the district to the project. And this is, we saw this last year in cases for technical projects or proposed technical projects that wanted to do, for instance, co-location of a monitor or a sensor with a district-operated site, right? So this is a new element that will enable that, and it'll define that, and it'll let us see that commitment. So it would behoove the applicants to, you know, have those have that dialogue and engagement with the districts to be able to tie them into and kind of give them a heads up on and engage them on, you know, what they're planning in that community. There's 10 scoring criteria this year. Last year, I think there was 8. So now we have 10. That's also in the guidelines. Grant applications that meet the minimum qualifications, which we went over. You have to meet the minimum qualifications first. Once you do, you'll be divided by the category, educational or technical. And then both of those types will be evaluated and scored separately to meet the cap for each. Priorities for year 2. We saw some of these same priorities last year. Projects that demonstrate partnership building and coordination, leveraging in-kind support and collaboration will be prioritized, receiving higher scores. We had that last year. New for this year are projects that foster workforce development, job creation and or job training. So those will be prioritized by receiving higher scores. Also projects located in selected communities under the AB 617 process with no previous air grant solely serving that community will be prioritized with higher scores. So that's kind of an overview of the major elements, items that were new for this year. The purpose of this workshop and the public comment period are to provide verbal and written comments, to let us know your priorities and ideas for example projects. The guidelines include a chart. Actually, I can point it out to you here. The guidelines include a table 1, starting on page 5. So we have the project types, we have it in the assistant concepts, and I showed you a modified version of that earlier. But we also have a column for example projects. That's not exhaustive. That is not exhaustive. So the idea behind this program is to be as responsive as we can to community-based organizations, and that means being as flexible as we can under the parameters that we've set up around the program design and the requirements, because we don't know all of the innovative kind of ideas that are out there that serve those communities the best. And so communities know, community-based organizations would know, you know, amongst from their constituency and who they advocate for. They're the ones that know. They're the experts in their communities. And so to the extent that you have ideas that are not on this examples list, that's fine. We want to see innovative proposals, so long as they are within the framework that we're setting up here. Those are on page 5 and 6. Also, we're gonna have a little bit of an opportunity here at the end of this presentation for Q&A. on the draft guidelines. So we'll try to answer your questions. If we can't answer them, we can get back to you, or we can take your commentary, take your consideration, or take your commentary for consideration as we work through to finalize these draft guidelines. And then also to provide any more information that we can, any tools or contacts that we can do through this program. So here's a couple of different ways you can let us know your thoughts, and check out some more of, check out this material online at our website. I mentioned the guidelines comment log. That's publicly accessible docket where you can submit comments and see everyone else's comments, and you can also email us. So we'll consider, all of the commentary you have through any means that you can get it to us. So that's it. That's all I had. For those, I just want to take a minute here at the end of this presentation before I ask for, if there's any comments or questions for us to note here in the auditorium. For those of you online, you can email any commentary or questions to the airgrants@arb.ca.gov address. That is, we have live access to that account right now, and we can kind of go over those here. You can also, we also have an operator-assisted phone line open right now, and I gave the number earlier, but I'll give it again for those online that want to actually call in. The number is 888-790-3519, and the access code is 642-8935. So we'll give a minute or two for folks that want to call in to queue up, and the operator can assist you to queue you up and chime you in. But feel free to either call or email. And with that, I think that's all I had. So we can take any commentary you might have now here in the building, and then also just know that the staff here on the EJ team is going to be here till noon. So we can, if you want to talk, or there's any comments that come in over the phone line or through email up until that time, we'll be part of this workshop that's going to be archived. So thank you. With that, I'll just kind of leave it open if there's any Q&A. We have some microphones here, so we'll ask you to speak into the mic, and so people online can hear your comment or your question. Thank you. So does anyone here have a question? I have a mic. There's a mic. We can run it over. And oh, got a question here. Thank you. You got to press the button. There you go. There you go. Green light.
Hello. Okay. Hi. My name is Kaylin Hammond. I'm with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. We're a current grantee under this, and I was wondering, one of the issues that we have faced is that the guidelines for last year did not allow an expense for food for community meetings. And I was wondering if that had been resolved. I apologize if it's in here. I did not do a thorough read through. I just kind of skimmed the guidelines. So I had a question on that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You're right. It wasn't. It wasn't permitted last year. It was Actually, I think we had prohibitive language on that. So if you skimmed through these guidelines, I don't think you saw that. So these are draft, so we haven't finished kind of that part of the guidelines. So stay tuned. Yeah, use it.
Okay. I would just encourage y'all to consider that, because we find that a great way to get community engagement is to have meetings in the evenings after work in the communities where folks live,
Right.
and making sure that it is not a burden for people to participate by providing dinner, by providing childcare, things like that, really promotes great community engagement.
Thank you for that comment. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. So we're considering that, and we'll take it back. Thank you.
Great. Another comment I have is regarding the reporting requirements.
Yeah.
I think it would be helpful to have that if we are planning to stick with the same template, to include that in the guidelines. And then just something that we have found is that the template is, it asks like very detailed questions of each specific task.
Right.
And we had, for example, we had like 2 main tasks and like 10 subtasks under each one.
Right.
And we, answered all of those questions for each subtask,
Right.
which, because they're so tied up with each other, it made it, I think, more difficult than it needed to be, the
Okay.
reporting. So as far as like, budget breakdown per
Right.
subtask, and
Sure.
when they're so intertwined, if that could be for like the major overarching task, I think
Right.
that would be helpful, and also produce a better product,
Right.
and not be as repetitive.
Thank you for that feedback. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Arlene Novotny from Access. A question, the AB 617 community monitoring, the communities, are those 10 that were picked previously last year?
Let me see if I understand the question. What's the exact question?
It was on the, was under the scoring, and then it said that you get, more points if you're in the areas that were.
What page on the scoring table?
Oh, 8. So the last one, they had program priorities.
Oh, yes, the program priorities, yes.
And so then the selected communities, those are the 10 selected communities, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if the scope gets bigger, look, I know you guys were thinking about expanding those 10 to other areas, and then would that be included also for this grant?
If any future selections occur, yes, they would meet that priority.
Okay, and then for the technical side of it,
Right.
is training a possibility for like community-based organizations?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your questions, comments.
Vincent Valdez. Vincent Valdez with A.T. Valdez Foundation.
Go ahead, I'll repeat your question. So the question was, of the 65 applications last year, how many were awarded? And we awarded 28.
Also, seeing that the funding was doubled, any possibility of this cycle as well?
So the question was about the funding. Last year, we were able to award up to 10 million. Will that happen? Will that be able to happen this year? And the answer is, we don't know. That's a function of the budgetary process. We're not aiming to replicate that because the oversubscription was so loud even, but we don't know how the budget will turn out for next year. But so right now we have 5 million. That's kind of what we're working with.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent.
Yeah, my comment is, we are the environmental air quality monitoring laboratories and the consultants or technical experts on monitoring. Is the database exists in this program that the community-based groups can access us and they can communicate with us, or we can talk to them, or?
Right, so the program is set up to provide technical assistance to community-based organizations. And so we kind of provide the framework and some of the parameters under which that can happen through technical projects. And so to the extent that a project is proposing, or proposed project requires some kind of technical expert or consultant for a piece of the project, then that's really a function of the community-based organization and how that they want to navigate that and be able to go out and get those resources and experts. So we wouldn't be funding them, we would be funding the community-based organization.
The database should be there so they can contact people in this program. There should be a database of consultant experts.
Okay, I see your comment now. Thank you.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Alex Ramio with the Ecomedia Compass, kind of along the same lines as the gentleman's question earlier. The communities are out there to try and find or generate their own monitoring or get their own programs, but if they're approached from professional organizations that would provide an overarching service for them, is this something that the communities, through their various committees, can endorse and get put onto this program?
I think the answer is that that's a function of how that organization operates, right? So to the extent that they're comfortable with that outfit, or they, however they do that, that is what we saw previously.
Okay.
So, right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Arlene Novotny again. I was just wondering, is this going to extend to indoor air quality, or is it just?
So AB 617 is community air protection and effort. Those are the efforts that we're leading. That CARB is leading, and this grants program is dovetails and supports that. So I don't. In terms of indoor air quality, I think we'd need to see like the specific proposal, but mainly we're looking at community air protection type projects, to the extent that the project can have a nexus to that. Those are the proposals that we've that we're expecting.
Something like how the outdoor air quality affects the indoor air quality.
Sure.
Because it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every proposal is unique and innovative to that community. So I think that's probably something we'd have to see and evaluate, right? I don't think we would necessarily be able to answer like in the setting, but we'd have to see that, and we can talk more. But I think there's proposals that look at those type of things.
Hi there. Sorry, Alex
Hey,
Rami
no
again.
sweat,
In regards to the indoor-outdoor air quality, the communities, especially in the Coachella Valley area and South Coast, they suffer not only local pollution but a lot of cross-boundary pollution, inbound either from the Long Beach area or from Mexico into their communities, or out of their communities contaminating other communities. Do these monies, I mean, if we were to organize multiple communities, could they pool their assets towards one larger overarching project rather than tiny little isolated
Right.
programs?
So we did say innovative proposals, right? But I mean, okay, there's a couple things there, We're talking about projects that need to be located in and benefiting a priority population or a tribal land. So that's a pretty specific and quantitative selection process. It's by census tract, and there's a tool online, and it's in the guidelines that you can use to identify that. So I mean, that's just one of the requirements. But I mean, kind of assuming that this proposal meets all those requirements, I don't know if there's any prohibition against that. And actually, we support leveraging collaboration and in-kind support. So you put those together, and it seems plausible that that would be something to consider. But you have to meet all of the requirements in the guidelines. So one of those communities couldn't be outside of a priority population census tract or tribal land, right? So those are the kind of considerations you'd have to have.
Yeah, but unfortunately, pollution is a non-discriminate contaminant. It decides, it goes where it wants.
Right.
The point of origin is in a tract that's designated, but the target destination is not.
Right. Right.
They're SOL.
So we are a program under the umbrella of the California Climate Investments Program. So there's funding guidelines and requirements and investment targets, and there are requirements that our program as an administrative agency follows. And so the funds, have certain, requirements that we have to meet to be able to fund projects, and benefiting a priority population is a big component. And so, we're not saying that the harmful emissions know where the boundaries are and all that type of what you're alluding to, right? The cross boundary, cross transport. I mean, we even have projects along the border with Mexico. If you worked in Coachella, and so what we're saying under this program is the benefits have to accrue, and the project needs to be located in those identified priority populations. So that's the way I would characterize that. Thank you for that question, though. It was great. And thank you for everyone's questions here in the audience. I'm wondering if we want to take a minute to inquire with the phone operator if there's anybody in the queue that we need to address or consider. Or if there's been any emailed questions, we can take and read those. Okay. Okay, we'll get those out in a second.
Hi, I have another question.
Yeah.
So I guess how far into the future, like, do we see this grant occurring? Are you looking to see like different grant like every year? Are you like, would you consider funding like a current grantee under this cycle, or would they need to wait until the 2020 cycle? Like, you
Right.
know, that.
Sure.
that
So there's no prohibition on funding a grantee that was already awarded, but I should remind you that under the scoring criteria, we look at how these projects, these proposed projects this year, not only stand on their own, but also collaborate and integrate with the 617 work going on in the districts and with CARB, and so there's criteria in there that will allow us to evaluate and assess that. So to the extent that your proposal can do that, you can see the points and you can see the evaluation process. But there's no, like, I would say prohibition on a grantee, getting another award if they're in this competitive process, if their project rises to that level. I thought you were going to ask about the time horizon to spend the funds. And so that's a good question. And so it's March 2022 for this year 2. That's on page 11, March 31st, 2022. So you're looking at about a 2-year project, give or take, right? So. Oh, we had a question online, so I'll read that now. I'm sorry, so just a minute. So the question is, will the Community Air Grants technical programs support community-based public health and clinical interventions to treat illnesses exacerbated by air pollution, such as asthma, in the AB 617 areas? So last year we saw, I don't know if we actually know, last year we didn't award any type of projects that did that or even proposed. I don't know if we saw projects that proposed that, but let me point you to page I just want to get this right for everybody here. Right, so yeah, page 2, the introduction. The aim is to provide support for community-based organizations to participate in the process, to build capacity, to become active partners with government, to identify, evaluate, and ultimately reduce air pollution and exposure to harmful emissions in their communities. So there's no specific, like, again, prohibition on what this question is mentioning, but under the scoring and evaluation process, I don't know if that's something that would be as competitive as something that addresses, that helps identify, evaluate, and ultimately to reduce this exposure to harmful emissions. But it's something we can consider. To the gentleman that emailed that, I know they're watching, so we can take this comment back and we can talk about it, but I don't think we saw any projects that were awarded that had that. I don't know, and I don't think we saw any in there that applied that proposed some of that, but we can take this back and look at it. So thank you for that question. I think there was a question here, Vincent. Yeah.
Yes, I had a question on the coalition bill.
Yes. Okay, so I think your mic went out, so I'll repeat the question. The question was, what are the priority populations we're talking about? So, priority populations, let's go to page, if you have a copy there with you. Page 7. Capacity and outcomes. So projects must be wholly located in and benefit a disadvantaged or low-income community as identified by Health and Safety Code 39711, 39713, or on tribal lands. And so that's, it's hard to picture what that is. So we actually included a link here. There's a link that you can go to. It's a map, and it'll tell you what those priority populations are. So this is all, the foundation of this is CalEnviroscreen, if you're familiar with that empirical model, that tool. And so that's a tool that is, I think we're bringing it up now, maybe online here, but that is a tool that OEHA developed and put out another office of CalEPA. And so there's another layer on top of that. So it's not just CalEnviroscreen, it's another analysis that goes kind of on top of that, pursuant to SB 535 and AB 1550. And that's the website that I gave you the link to. And that's a CARB's website under the California Climate Investments Program. And there it is. Thank you, Trish. So if you go to this map, you can actually see by census tract, because that is the basis of this tool, is by census tract. You can see those priority populations. So your project or the proposals that we're going to be looking at and evaluating have to be located wholly in and benefiting, you know, these census tracts on this page, or tribal lands. So that's the way to get there. And it's any of those. It's either the solid blue, the solid red, or the crosshatch. So that's the priority populations map.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I think we have another question queued up on the email account. So I did want to take this a minute to talk about reporting. Actually, it was a great comment from somebody who's actively in that program right now, doing this work. And so we're going to look at that in terms of, including that template, the reporting template. That sounds like a pretty good idea to do that, so folks can see what that looks like. But I just wanted to talk about the reporting because we have some pretty specific reporting requirements. They're the same as last year, so I didn't actually go over them, but they're quarterly, and then there's a yearly. So we provide a template to try to make it more efficient, and that's what she was referring to, the reporting template. And it's the same template for the quarterlies or the annual report. But the idea would be that it's you are able to fill up the template for the first report. You can then build on top of it and continue to use that. So you won't have to kind of produce this. We're trying to make it less intensive as your project matures. But you mentioned it's overall. So we're asking for a percentage overall of completed work, and then by task. And so I don't think I talked about it here, but in the budget, we made a slight tweak to what we're asking on the budget. And last year, we didn't ask budget by task. We asked budget cumulative. And so when folks were reporting, they were like, well, our budget is cumulative, and it wasn't necessarily by task because you didn't ask. And so then when they had to report, it was challenging for some. So this time we are asking to show your budget overall and then by task. So just to note that. So you'll see that we did include a template of the budget. It's in the packet, and then also I think we talk about that when we discuss the budget and the guidelines, but just wanted to mention that because it kind of goes with your question here. We have one question in the audience, and then we have a couple emails.
Okay.
Go ahead, that's fine.
I was just going to say, is that new template, the new format that you're requiring, is that part of the new requirement, the submission requirement, to show the itemized budget?
It's the same template we used last year. We made a few slight changes.
Yeah.
So it's included, yeah.
So the itemized requirement is included in that budget?
Yes. The narrative, your budget narrative, yes, that's what we're asking for, the itemized.
Okay.
Yes. And we have a couple of questions here. So the first question is the comment, actually. This is a comment. I hope you will provide funds to purchase more accurate air monitoring equipment and less emitting grills for restaurants in Fresno. So thank you for that comment. Yeah, one of the things we saw with these projects last year was with the advent of the low-cost or next-generation air monitoring sensors, right? These low-cost sensors, and so there was a lot of emphasis on that, and then some projects proposed more traditional type, different equipment that wasn't necessarily low cost, and so there's a wide variety there. And that's one of the reasons why we are having folks do a technical work plan to think these things through, right? What are the objectives? What are the data quality objectives? What do you want to do? What are you trying to do? You don't necessarily have to have all the answers right now, but you're going to have to kind of formulate and talk through and describe what you're wanting to do, and how is that going to help your community, right? And so that's why we're asking for the first 5 elements, and we're pointing to it, and it's part of the blueprint. And so air districts are already utilizing that and have been since it was approved in October of last year, and now the Air Grants program is also pointing to it and utilizing it. So Um, The other comment or question here is, would general community outreach to raise awareness about climate change, GHG emissions, helping farm workers prevent climate-induced heat illnesses be an eligible education project under this solicitation as written? So the answer for educational is yes, because we don't, we are a California Climate Investment Program, and we have to follow those guidelines. But we also look at the primary benefits of our program as toxic air contaminants and criteria air pollutants as outlined and mandated and kind of directed by AB 617. So educational projects that cover these topics are definitely able to be considered. Again, this is a competitive program, so you need to be able to show and prove how this proposal is gonna meet the requirements, and then, you know, kind of go beyond what we're asking here in the guidelines and, you know, relative to the pool of applicants that we have, right? So just wanted to mention that again. These are competitively ranked and scored.
Just to add that the question somebody asked about the accurate monitoring, again, there's a need for monitor every day. So there should be people, community groups should be able to access that database, that they can find out the accurate monitoring procedures and sampling procedures and all that.
Yeah, great comment. So in case for folks online, if you didn't hear, because I think the mic is was going in and out, but just echoing the fact that community groups need to have access to the technical and consultants, some kind of database you're suggesting or mentioning of the universe of these consultancies and technical advisors out there. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. I think that's a couple things. We, as part of the Office of Community Air Protection, Karen's program, there, you know, we're looking to the environmental justice team is looking to support that program in terms of adding resources to our website, not just for the air grants, but for communities in general. There's like a clearinghouse part of their website, and there's a lot of technical information on things like BACT and BART and those types of technical aspects of AB 617. But there's also, we're looking at a place where folks can get other information, maybe like what you suggest.
Because we consultants, we have spent years in monitoring and accurate analysis, best equipment and all that.
Right.
So the people not inventing the wheel again.
Right, right. Thank you for that. So we have a question, actually several questions that were emailed in, so I'm kind of just going through the list, and we'll read those out in a second. So we have a list here of questions that were emailed in, so maybe like 7 or 8 questions, so we can kind of just go down the line here. So here's the first question. Is the grant allocation classification between education and technical programs mutually exclusive, or can a project be considered both? In the description of budget allocation for each, does that refer to the proposed project as a whole, or to the ed and tech components of the project? So the answer to that is they are not mutually exclusive. If you can have an educational project with a technical component, but if you have a technical component, you're going to have to do the attachment B. And if it has a technical component, we're going to consider it as a technical project. So I should say that the technical projects can encompass educational. And if you're proposing something that's more educational but has a piece of a technical component, we're going to consider that technical. Why? Because you're going to have to go through the technical work plan, and we're going to have to evaluate that piece. It can be a small piece of your project, but that's something you're going to have to consider, because we need a way to kind of evaluate these projects, right? And not necessarily against each other, because then, you talk about issues of kind of a skewed portfolio, right, where you have a lot of one type of project versus another. And so if you're wanting to do an educational and you wanted to have some kind of technical component, like a lot of, like for instance, what we saw a lot previously and what we've heard are educational and outreach projects, and there's some kind of technical component that has to do with, like, let's say, handheld sensors in a school to do STEM education, which is great. And I think we have projects funded like that. This year, if you have that component, you're going to have to walk us through how exactly and what exactly you're going to be proposing for that STEM curriculum, and how those handheld monitors or sensors are going to work into your educational project. And we're going to consider the whole thing a technical project because of that piece. So just to be clear about that. The next question that they're asking is funding. So if the funding allocation for educational is 100K and the tech is 300K, can a project request up to 400K for the aforementioned respective maximums? The answer is no, because we're considering we would consider a technical as 300K. So that's something that applicants should consider. So the proposal is, the draft proposal is putting the caps at 300 and 100 respectively. So the question was, is the best thing to do split them up? I can tell you we're going to be evaluating them separately. So that should give some guidance to how you propose. There's some more questions here on this email. Under tech allocation, how much can be spent on hardware? Air sensors, micro sensing units, is there a limit? Currently, there is no limit. But again, I got to tell you, this is a competitive program, and technical projects have to submit the technical work plan, and we're going to be looking at details like that and evaluating details like that. And so if there's a disproportionate amount of funding in one area relative to another area, that's something that we would be evaluating. So I don't know if we had a limit. I don't even know if, how we can, and we probably could talk about this and consider it. These are draft guidelines. We have had this comment before, and we can probably talk about it, but right now there is no kind of threshold limit. I think there's a couple of questions here in the audience. Let me get you the mic.
Go ahead.
Oh, here we go. We have a comment here, or a microphone here.
What's this? It's already good. I've heard a lot of comments on the collection of data, monitoring equipment, whatnot. So where's the component to really evaluate what is collected, interpret what is collected? Is that all part of the work plan that's supposed to be put together by the individual communities? And
So attachment B talks about that. So attachment B talks about things like identifying the community-specific air monitoring need, providing background on how this was discovered, exploring alternative approaches. I mean, is there another way to get this information? Identifying the scope of actions that the air monitoring aims to support.
so this is more identification, not remediation.
Correct. You know, things like the objectives of the monitoring. So one thing I want to, actually, let me just continue reading because you guys are from a laboratory, and I just want to make sure you get this part. Defining monitoring objectives. You know, this is on page 58 of the guidelines you have. We're talking about things like, you know, not at least, but outlining pollutants, preliminary methods, technologies, instrumentation, air monitoring, areas and frequencies, specifying the draft design, not the final. We're not asking you to come in with a final. There's a technical work plan. So types of data needed, measurements needed to be made, the duration of monitoring you're proposing. So it's really a step-by-step process to think through like a work plan, right? Like a data collection work plan. And so the first 5 elements do that. And that's what we're asking folks to think through and to accomplish as part of this submittal if they are proposing a technical project. And that will, we think, allow us to see kind of like and evaluate and score these in a way that we'll be able to select from among all the applications the most promising and robust and innovative, right, that are looking at this and have thought these things through under their technical work plan. That doesn't mean when you come in you have everything you know, final. It's not a final work plan. It's just the preliminary technical work plan we're asking for. So it's analogous to like a work plan in the field, which you guys are probably familiar with. So I hope that answers that part of it. It's not the we're not asking for like a final.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around
Right.
the whole community, you know, outreach program and whatnot. So the main objective is to identify issues going on in the, you know, in the individual communities, educate,
Right.
you know, and then possibly go into a technical aspect on how to address it.
Right. Yeah, you can, your project can, as for instance, as an outcome, propose to produce, you know, recommendations based upon your findings, right? And you can take those recommendations to your district, if there's, and to CARB actually, right, and to inform kind of what's going on in your community. And so the way that we've set it up is trying to, by submittal of this attachment B, the technical work plan, trying to standardize some of the process so that we're speaking the same language and the data can be meaningful, as our colleagues will tell you in our monitoring and laboratory division. And so this is what they put together as part of the blueprint, that framework document I spoke to you about. And so that's what the districts, air districts in these basins are using to implement AB 617. So then it would make sense and in fact support a community's efforts to speak that same language. And so that's kind of what we're getting at with attachment B. There's another comment here.
It goes back to, and this is Alex Ramier again, it goes back to the relationship of the size of the areas and combining them. I mean, when I'm looking at the maps behind you, those are some pretty large areas, and small in situ hand sensors are not going to be not going to give you a broad reading across there. So if you were proposing something larger, more comprehensive, either airborne, satellite, space, you would be covering a much greater region. Are you still limited to the one little 300? I think 300 on the technical, 100 on the,
Oh, I see.
because you're dealing with a much bigger region than
Well,
what you would be classifying.
this program is about community air, and 617 is about community air protection, and so that's kind of the granularity we're focusing on, is community. You know, this isn't SIP implementation plan work. This isn't at that scale, basin scale work of what, you know, is probably what we all know and are used to. This is completely new. This is focused on in between those pieces. And so, you want to repeat that?
I'm sorry, yeah. Well, I understand that. We're getting away from ambient reporting, which is the normal AQMD reporting, to more localized reporting, community reporting.
Correct.
We're just saying that the capability of some vendors' equipment can cover quite a few communities.
Right, and so going through the technical work plan, you know, the project would have to identify like what are the types of potential instrumentation that would be appropriate for what they want to look at in their community. Maybe it is what you suggest, I don't know. But it would have to be determined in the stepwise process to do that. We think they can help people do that, they can help Scoop do that, is this pre-work plan attachment B, which is really based on the blueprint's Appendix E. So I think we're pulling up here the locations of the first year selected communities. And so these are, you know, going to your point, localized. So I mean, I think the other map, it was just a conglomeration, right? It was just showing everything overlaid, and so it was maybe, you know, it's easier to think about it in terms of this map, which is kind of identifying specifically communities. And even this is, you know, there's even more granularity here, because within these areas, you know, the 617 process itself, through these community steering committees, has done kind of this exercise of identifying where in their community they really want to focus on, you know, on like almost like a street level, right? And so it's really an intensive process and exercise that the districts and the communities are conducting in these areas to identify the communities, and that's a process that's been going on. The air grants are here to support that process to the extent that we can, but it's not exclusive. The air grants are not exclusive to these selected communities. We are prioritizing them if they didn't have one before, but they're not mutually exclusive to these communities, because there's other communities out there that might be on the list to get selected next time, and maybe they get an air grant and they're building the capacity so that they can hit the ground running when they do get selected, right? And so this is a resource, however small, you know, we're talking about, but it is a resource statewide. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here.
Yes, this was the map I was kind of hoping to see earlier, because the South Sacramento Florin community is a small sample of the air in our area. It doesn't encompass downtown, it doesn't encompass I-5, and so I was just wondering how we could branch over into the nicer neighborhoods that have pollution problems as well. I mean, I-5 and 99 are so close to each other, but we're not even over onto that.
Right.
And so how do we collaborate? And South Sacramento is almost into Elk Grove. And so where there's two cities there, and there's just a lot of different
Right.
obstacles in the collaboration efforts part.
Yes, yes, I agree. So I think you're referencing the South Sacramento Florin selected community
Yes, I am.
with that overlay map that we saw earlier with the priority populations, and then potentially any proposals, project proposals that would have to cover. Is that kind of what you're?
Yes.
Okay, right. And so, yeah, you would have to be. I think the way that we're setting this up is we're giving space for kind of these proposals to be as innovative as they can be. So I don't have an answer to how one project, air grant project, can cover all of these three things. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just don't have that analysis in front of me. But I know that under the priorities and the guidelines we're setting up, we're prioritizing selected communities that don't have an air grant wholly located, like South Sacramento, Florin. So you have that building block to start with. There's the requirement for projects to be in priority populations. That's kind of where that analysis comes in, how you're going to be able to tie that in. I don't know that area that well, but we can, you can look at the map and kind of see how far south it goes, and then reference to where you or your group or any group is wanting to operate and implement a project. So long as that project is meeting the requirements of these guidelines, and you meet the minimum the qualifications, we will consider it. We will evaluate it. And like I mentioned, the South Sacramento Florin area is being prioritized, right, among the other ones that were selected and don't have an air grant fully in there. So you have some stuff to start with, I would say, if that's what you're looking at. But I think it would just take a little more thinking through, right? And I could, we can talk about the guidelines. I can talk to you about it if you have specific questions. But I should note that once the final guidelines are posted in June, our staff, ARB, we cannot answer specific questions on this anymore because because it's a competitive process. So up until these are draft comments, and we encourage dialogue and your commentary. We want to have these conversations, but because of the nature of the competitive process, once they're posted, we're not going to be able to do that or necessarily have those dialogues. We will have, under the guidelines, we are planning one question and answer session, which we had last time. So what we'll do is, and this is laid out in the guidelines, we'll release the guidelines, and then we'll have a call or a workshop where folks can actually ask questions, where we write those down, and we answer them to the best of our ability within the parameters set up in the guidelines. And then we transcribe that, and then we post that, so everybody has the same information. So as not to advantage or disadvantage anybody, but that's when the final guidelines are posted. Right now, I mean, if there's specific questions you have, I mean, I think we could probably talk about it.
And I did have one more question,
Yeah.
Or a comment. It was along the lines of the indoor-outdoor air quality.
Yes.
One of our projects was going to be air purifiers and have a workshop, because some of the feedback we received is people had their asthma problems and they couldn't get their breathing back until they went in their homes. And some people said it took hours, and then one person commented that they put their air purifier on and they were able to stabilize their breathing. So I don't know if that's the indoor-outdoor component is going to be in these grants or not, and so.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that's probably something we'll take back. Thank you. I just wanted to continue down the list of questions that we received earlier. So how does the program measure success? Is the objective to improve air quality or increase awareness? If the latter, to influence policy, are you referring to environmental assessment processes under CEQA? So I want to begin to answer this question by turning to page 3. The community air grants projects shall further the purposes of AB 617 and AB 32 in California communities. Under the air grants program, this goal shall be accomplished by projects that build capacity in communities through supporting community-based organizations and community members' participation in the implementation of AB 617. So that's how we define success, the participation in the implementation of AB 617, because that's our statutory mandate. That's what we have to do. That you saw that in Health and Safety Code. We're not referring to the environmental assessment process under CEQA at all. That's a requirement that we have to do as an agency for each project, and so there's a separate attachment that we ask some basic information about your proposal, like things that will allow us to do that and carry out that analysis. But the vast majority of proposals, you know, this is not that analysis is not something that is too intensive based on the nature of these projects. If they're outreach and engagement by nature, that's probably something that, you know, and I'm not a CEQA an analyst, but the outreach and engagement projects are things that make our CEQA analysis, you know, easy. If there's some kind of technical project with some kind of construction or something, that's another question, but you still have to submit that information. And we still have to do that analysis piece. Do you prefer projects which span over a year or more, or is that left to the discretion of the grant seeker? That's left to their discretion. The only limit we have is the March 31st, 2022 deadline on page 11. All funds granted must be liquidated by March 31, 2022. What is an example of fostering partnerships? So we saw a lot of this in the inaugural first round, year 1. So trying to think of a good example. We saw a community-based organization work with their local air district to do some kind of co-location of these low-cost sensors. And so I don't think that had really been done before. And that's a partnership on that specific piece that is new as a result of the Air Grants program and what that community organization was trying to do. That's fostering partnerships. You know, fostering partnerships is prioritized because it helps to build the capacity out of a community to be involved in this process. AB 617 is complex. There's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of areas of programs and policy, right? And so no one agency or entity has kind of all of the answers nor authorities. But we're implementing it. CARB implements it along with the districts. And some communities have the capacity to dialogue and have that level of sophistication. Some groups do. Some groups are still trying to do that. And we want to build everybody up to be able to have these dialogues, and so folks can sit at the table with CARB, with the districts, to be able to do that. And as a nature, you know, the nature of these community organizations is they're all unique to where they're from. They're all unique to their community, and so we don't know exactly, we're not experts like in every community, the community is, and so we want to meet them where they're at. And so if that means they want to partner with their district to do a specific type of technical piece of their project, and that's a new relationship, that's fostering partnership. If they want to work with a university researcher who specializes in kind of these community-based research projects, that they've, as a result of this grant, that's fostering partnerships. So there's examples of fostering partnerships, and those are the kind of things that, again, are prioritized, because that kind of builds this fabric within that community to be able to be able to have that language and articulate some of the problems that folks and communities see in their neighborhoods, right? Whereas maybe they weren't able to do that before. And that's really what we're aiming for in terms of, why would we want to foster partnerships, is to build that fabric. Could you indicate if there's a greater need for projects in rural versus urban areas? Is there an assessment of population at risks that this grant aims to serve beyond specification of priority populations in tribal lands? No, there's not an assessment beyond the priority population in tribal lands. The reason for that is, again, we're trying to be inclusive, not exclusive. This is a statewide resource for every community, California community. Is there a greater need for projects in rural versus urban areas? I don't know if I can indicate that. Again, we're not trying to exclude any one type over another in terms of geography. I think we set up the kind of the division and the caps in terms of project type, more on project type, less on geography. So I can indicate that. We can look to the AB 617 selection process behind me as a guide, but that's really only the first year's kind of selections, and it was indicative of a process to have representation from all kinds of different types of communities. And again, we're not being mutually exclusive. The grants are not mutually exclusive to those types of communities. It's a competitive program statewide. But we're basing this evaluation and rank scoring process on the type, not necessarily the geography. Because what works best in your community might not work as well somewhere else. There's a question.
It seems strange because, I mean, like I alluded to before, pollution is non-discriminatory. And a lot of the sources of pollution, especially in this great state, come from our transport arteries and from the exposed that are out there. The prevailing winds carry that all through communities that may not be part of AB 617, and yet they've still got to breathe that stuff that's coming in.
Right, you don't have to be part of 617 for an air grant. I just mentioned that, yeah. I might have if I tried to clear that up. Yeah, it's not exclusive to what you see behind me. I'm just going to keep going. This was a really great and long email, so I'm going to keep reading from it. Are there any data gaps, monitoring area data geographically, that you believe this grant could help alleviate? Again, I mean, this is a program focused at the community scale, not traditional basin or kind of those coverages and geographies, right? So it's a new program, and there's a lot that we don't know at the community level. So I don't know, I don't know if we have enough to answer that, but I know that groups that live in those communities have a lot to say to us. So I think we need to listen more than we need to tell them what's a problem in their neighborhood. And so that's kind of what these grants are for. So we have a few more minutes, and that was the end of that one email. We can check if we have anybody on the phone line or any more emails, and then we can kind of wrap it up here pretty soon. Thank you for for staying for the whole 2 hours and spending your Friday before the holiday weekend in Cali Bay building. One thing I did want to mention for the folks here in the room, we do have a couple of copies of the document that I keep referencing, the blueprint. So we have just a few here. Please, we have 5. So, but it's all online. It's all online. Please.
Nothing like a hard copy. Thank you.
Sure.
Can run upstairs and grab more, Ryan, if we're short on.
So I don't think we have any comments on the phone or coming in via email, so we're going to just take a brief pause, and I'll come back to close up our time here together. Thank you. So just a note really quick here, for those in the building and online, we're gonna go ahead and close it up. It's 10 to 12. I don't think there's any more questions here. This is gonna be archived, so folks can check that out online. You can email us anytime for questions at airgrants@arb.ca.gov. Thank you for joining, and we're going to go ahead and close it out. Thank you. Thank you.